Don't let your loyalties bankrupt your business. If it's the wrong person, you got to get rid of them. You're doing them a favor, you're doing your business a favor. And this hope of, oh, maybe it'll get better, maybe with a little more training, maybe with a little more time. And I'm not a harsh guy, I really am not. But what happens is you hold out in the hope, and we invested this much time in training them and they're going to get better. No, here's the story, right? That's as good as they're going to get. Some can be moved marginally.
Hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Richard Parker.
And if this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of these amazing episodes. And if you're on iTunes, go ahead and rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps get the word out to great leaders and entrepreneurs like yourself.
And don't forget, sharing is caring. Please help me welcome Richard with How to Buy a Good Business. This is Cedric Francis, and you are listening to Lead to Greatness.
I've been in the world of mergers and acquisitions, which is a very fancy word for buying and selling businesses, or an acronym, for 34 years. And I've been on the buy side, sell side, investor side, intermediary side. I've purchased 14 companies, including one co-investment, and I've bought everything from Main Street USA businesses for $50,000 to a co-investment of over 200 million. So I've been all over the place, but actually a gradual progression. Made tons of mistakes along the way, and I spend most of my days now helping prospective business buyers acquire businesses. So it's been fun. Love this industry, and been doing it a whole long time. So I don't know if I'm really good at it. I'm just old, and I'm doing it a long time. It is enormous, the field. People don't hear about it because you hear about these big companies doing these deals, and so for the average person, they don't think it's within their realm of possibilities to do this. But I can assure you that it is. I got into this. Actually, it was 1990 when I got into this first time, and the reason being is I got into this out of desperation. I was working for a company. I was doing quite well. I was 29 years old, and I was an idiot about how I invested my money in the stock market, and I blew $60,000, pretty much close to everything that I had. And I realized, like, the only way I'm going to get out of this hole, I wasn't going to change jobs because I was overpaid as it was. So it's not like someone else is going to pay me more. And I loved what I was doing, but I recognized the only way I was going to get out of that hole at that point was to get into something where I didn't have a ceiling on my upside. And so I looked at a couple of options, and blowing it all or taking it all to Las Vegas wasn't realistic. And I look at it, and I didn't have much of an option. I had to get into something, and this it seemed like a really good path, and that's how I got into it. And here we are many years later, and it's been quite a hell of a run.
Let's go back. You said 34 years. What is something or some things that you know now that you wish you would have known then?
I think the answer to that, for me anyways, is more almost philosophical. I was a young business owner. I didn't know what I was doing. I did, yes, make a lot of mistakes, and if you learn from them, they're all good. But it was really more from a standpoint of probably ego and insecurity. As a very young business owner, I was 29 years old, and then into my early 30s, which was very different than it is now. Undoubtedly, my ego and insecurity got in the way of me doing some better things related to operating the business, dealing with employees, leading companies that they've been great lessons. But had I done them earlier, I think I would have been further ahead even sooner, because I put unnecessary restrictions on myself because of those two mental blocks. When I realized that was a hindrance, there was no value to either one of those two. They weren't assets. If you look at this from a financial standpoint, those two character traits were not assets. They were significant liabilities. So getting past that and those two was changed my universe. I think mindset is a good overarching theme to lay on it. And, mindset it's somewhat overused because people don't even know how to, allocate it, if you will. But it was certainly a mindset of how I approached business and to, to give you some examples is my insecurity caused me to hire people that didn't challenge me.
Gotcha.
They I'm not the smartest guy by any means, but they weren't even as smart as me. I hired people that would agree with me. I didn't hire people that would push back.
Yeah.
So that was really restrictive, because if you want to grow, you've got to be able, personally or professionally, I mean, you've got to surround yourself with people that are smarter. That's lesson 101. I mean, that's without question. But it took me a while to realize that, and it really restricted me.
Before you got to that point, and now hiring a team, because I mean, I hear the echo in what you're saying is important to have a great team for the vision to go forward. So what's the parallel looks like between not having it and having the right team? What are some things that you dealt with? Because that's somewhere I'm right now listening, and they haven't grasped that concept yet. So help us out.
Okay, perfect. So what happens is you have these blinders on when you're not hiring right people. Blinders, what I mean by that is you get stuck in your own world. You own a business, it's doing okay, may even be doing well, but you're not looking outside those blind spots because you think you're really good. And it actually, what happens is, even if you start to do marginally better, you actually start to blow smoke up your own rear end and think you start really good at things, and you're actually not. You're actually worse off, because you have these little growth spurts when you could have these quantum leaps. And so you end up surrounding yourself with people who are, yes men and yes women, and you think you're doing well, versus the parallel of the other side is to hire the absolute best possible people you can and can afford to hire, number one. The second thing is no yes men, no yes women. Empowering people around you to make decisions. Because when you hire people that are bigger, better, faster, and smarter than you, just let them do their job. That's the whole darn reason why you hired that person. And absolutely. So let them do their job. If you have, I've always believed in this E squared thought process, my own thought process, which is empathy and empowerment. Means show empathy to your employees and empower them to do their job. The other thing, which is equally important in all of this, is as you look to hire these better people, and it's not hard to find good people. People have this idea that it's not hard to find good people. It is not hard to find good people if you look for them. It's hard to find good people if you don't want to hire good people. But the other part of it is, don't let your loyalties bankrupt your business. If it's the wrong person, you got to get rid of them. You're doing them a favor, you're doing your business a favor. And this hope of, maybe it'll get better, maybe with a little more training, maybe with a little more time. And I'm not a harsh guy. I really am not. But what happens is you hold out in the hope, and we invested this much time in training them and they're going to get better. No, here's the story, right? That's as good as they're going to get. Some can be moved marginally, but the fact of the matter is, most of the time, that's as good as they're going to get. And if that's not good enough for your company and you keep them employed, you're actually hurting them in addition to your own business. So let them know and give them an opportunity to be somewhere else where they can flourish.
Knowledge bomb. This is good, Richard, because sometimes you can get compassion mixed up with progress. And I have to say that I'm guilty of this as well. And I know a lot of people that's guilty of the same thing, but getting to that aspect when you want to start thriving in your business, you really have to make that shift. I want to shift real quick to actually buying businesses. You see the business, you don't know anything about the business. I mean, what is the process you're going through to see and to choose if this is the right business for me?
I must tell you, go to the front of the class, because that's the billion-dollar question. The matching of your skill set to the right business is everything. And I can't emphasize that enough. To give you some context, there's 23 steps in the process of buying business. At the very beginning, from things that you have to consider to the very end of your post-purchase priorities. In between those, there's 21 other steps. So there's 23 in total. The reality is, if you do a flawless job on identifying the right business for you, you can actually do a marginal job on the other 22, and you're going to be okay. That's how important it is. And people fail because they don't recognize that. And they think that, I just had this conversation recently with someone where people confuse expertise with experience. They're two completely different things. Just because you worked in healthcare doesn't mean you got to buy a healthcare business. Just because you worked in a commercial a cleaning company doesn't mean you got to buy a commercial cleaning company, etc. It's your expertise, and everybody has this one shining star, this one part of their skill set that's above every other one. And whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of the revenue and profit of any business you consider purchasing. Because for everything else you can hire. And so the process as you go through it, you have to look at this like a funnel. At the top, you have no clue. You don't know the industry, you don't know what you're good at. So you have to load up the top with a bunch of different businesses. You have to go visit businesses. You have to speak with business owners. You have to find out, you have to dig to find out what drives their business, what they do every day, why some businesses thrive, why other ones fail. Speak to other business owners in that industry who don't even want to sell, for example, until you could weed it down to say, this is what I'm really good at, and this is what this type of business needs to drive, and then you've got the match. You don't want to back into it by saying, well, I'll just look at 100 different business types, because you'll spend the next 10 years doing that. So you want to narrow it down. And as soon as the light goes on and you start to understand your best skill set with the right business, then it's easy to find and buy, because then you could have a targeted search. Like I have 5 golden rules for any business that I don't buy. Well, never 4, only 5, but that's through years of doing this exact exercise that I try to reduce for people.
You said there's 5 golden rules. So this is kind of configured to your strengths and weaknesses, or what does that look like? Okay.
Exactly my strengths and weaknesses, which they are, and I'll rattle them off quickly. So to me, I want a business that's sales and marketing driven. I want an element of exclusivity, either in the product or the service. I want a business that has high gross margins, because if it has high gross margins, I don't care about the revenue, because my sales and marketing skills will generate revenue. And as long as there's high margin, that'll ultimately by default lead to profit. I want a business that has demand in place for the product or service. And I definitely want a business that does not compete on price, because that's not a sustainable business model. So those are my 5 rules. Now, those aren't your 5. Those are my 5. So you have to develop your own. But once you have those and you know your skill set, then finding and buying it is quite easy.
How do you discover a business that's, let's say, undervalued, but it has potential to grow?
The way I see it is there's 3 pieces to that you want to investigate. The one is the industry. So making sure that the industry itself has a good future, because even if the business is, quote, undervalued, unquote, if the future doesn't look good, it doesn't really matter. So the first piece is the industry. The second thing is related to the owner of the business, to find out if it's overvalued. And by that, I mean, what has the owner been doing? Have they been on cruise control? Have they, or are they a control freak, meaning they have to do everything and haven't hired the right people, like we talked about earlier? What have they done in the past couple of years as far as new hires, new people, and new initiatives are concerned? Meaning, have they undertaken doing anything new? Or again, does it lead to the first thing, which they've just had their business on cruise control for the last little while? And I can't tell you how many businesses are on cruise control. It is unreal. So that's a terrific opportunity. And the third piece with this, so you have the industry itself, the owner, and then the business. The third piece is wherever they operate. For example, whether they're local or it's a company that provides a global product or service, have they saturated the market geographically? Meaning, if it's very different if you have a dry cleaner on Main Street, it's very different than if you have a product or service that could be sold throughout the state or the country. So have they saturated the market potential geographically? Again, what other major initiatives have they undertaken related to the business? And the third part related to the business and whether or not it's undervalued is you got to go visit the business. You can't imagine what you can take away by watching the business in action. Sometimes you go in and everybody's buzzing. Stuff is happening. People look busy. They look energized. They look excited. The phone is ringing. People are picking up their cell phone. There's action going on in the warehouse or whatever part of the business it may be. That's entirely different than you walk into a business and everybody looks like they just drank a pint of vodka, right? They're just sitting there and chilled out and, doesn't have that same sense of urgency. The buzz itself will tell you to a large extent what's
Wow.
going on. Like, is there energy in the business? And when
Yeah.
there's none of those things, you look at it and say, okay, the industry looks positive. I find an owner is on cruise control, doesn't seem to be trying any new things, and the business is sleepy. Well, there's an opportunity here because I got a good industry, a low energy seller, and a business where I can energize these people as long as I know they're the right people. So I look at that and say that there's a very distinct possibility that is undervalued.
Let's say great industry, but the leadership within the organization, I don't know, maybe it was the business owner, his cousin and his nephew and his auntie and all of them, they're destroying the company, but he wouldn't give it. How do you deal with something like that?
Well, I think the first thing that you need to do is look and say, if under that type of scenario, it is entirely possible that may not be a business to purchase. I mean,
Ah,
if you suddenly have to replace 4 or 5 key people, and this business is new to you, you may look back and say, hey, this business has a lot of potential. And I don't want to be like, it's important for your listeners to understand the flip side of things, right? Because you look at that and say, hey, maybe this thing is really, it's just not workable. You got too many relatives. They're all used to maybe cushy jobs for not doing a whole lot of work. And I'm going to have to replace potentially too many people. And that may not make sense.
ah,
Similarly, if you have a business where you identify that the individuals seem to have a spark, here's typically how you can find it. When the owner is the micromanager, the people aren't empowered. I mean, that's obvious. Like, that's like math, right?
ah,
So one of the questions I like to ask prospective sellers is, there's a couple things, of course. One of the main things is, what keeps you up at night? The second thing is, how much vacation do you take? Because if they tell you, oh, I haven't taken a vacation in years or whatever, they're micromanaging. If they tell you, they take a lot of vacation, well, it's because the business can operate well without them. I had one client took 120 days vacation. And I like to tell clients who buy, who end up buying a business, you have to figure out what happens if you get hit by a Pepsi Cola truck tomorrow. If you can take a leave of absence for 6 months and not call in the office, you built the right team. And
mm,
so, the other thing why I've talked about visiting the business when you're looking to acquire it, when you're sitting across from the seller and you're having a conversation, if he or she keeps picking up their cell phone, talking to customers, employees are interrupting, there's a break or he has to change the meeting, all of a sudden he walks out and they get onto a phone for 15 minutes or whatever, you realize they're way too involved. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to be involved in your business. But if you're doing all those things, you could rest assured everybody's being micromanaged.
yeah,
This buyer, this owner thinks that they're bigger than the game. They got to do everything. They got to know everything that's going on. They're in everybody's face. Those are problems. Now,
yeah.
a lot of those are correctable with the right person. When you stand back and you put the right processes, systems, trainings, procedures into place, you organize the place. But those are all possible. But they're telltale signs of how someone micromanages a business.
So what is your involvement like as far as the tweaking? Like, say, okay, this business look really great. It has potential. What type of systems are you mainly focused on when you're looking at the different departments?
Okay, so we're going to make the assumption someone has identified that this is a good business. They want to make the acquisition.
Yes.
So the first thing out of the gate is, at the beginning of your acquisition, as it relates to the process, procedures, and systems, you do nothing. You sit back and you learn the business for 3 to 6 months.
Mhm.
But the goal is, I look to try to do the following, and this is the way people should go about doing this. What do you need to add, systems wise or tech wise, that's going to make everybody better at their job? The first place you start is you ask the people. Or you can't even imagine. I mean, it's like the answer is so simple it all sounds dumb,
Yeah.
right? Because they'll tell you. Now, some of them get crazy and tell you, but very often you'll hear someone's using a computer. They can't get. So I've had plenty of times where people say, do you know how long it takes me to download a document from a client? Or this takes forever, or I'm using a 14-year-old laptop, or, and you see this in healthcare, as crazy as it sounds. We're still faxing out documents. So you take a look back to, how is the business operating today?
Yeah.
The beauty of technology is there's so much available and it's really inexpensive for the most part.
Yeah.
But I take a step back and I advise the people who are buying businesses, you take a step back, you do nothing for the first few months, you observe, you ask questions, you speak to every employee, every department, and you understand, how can I make your job easier? How can I make you better at your job? What systems would make you better? What technology, what machinery will make you better?
Yeah.
And people are not going to say, "Oh, just pay me more money." That almost never happens. What they're sincere. They're going to tell you things that are really, really important. And then you're able to digest it. I had a number of companies that I acquired. I spent, 90 days really thinking about it, and then built entire back ends of them. And at the time, it was quite an investment, but the dividends that it pays afterwards are incredible. And so you slice and dice through each department to figure out, what are they doing now? How can they do it better?
Yeah. So do you do this, or you have a team to help you through this process?
Well, when I acquire a business, I get very, very involved
Mm.
at the beginning, because I want to learn the business. I mean, I like bringing management into place, but it sort of lends itself to some of these people that, think that they can buy absentee run businesses. Well, absentee run businesses usually equal absentee run profits. You have to learn the business first. And so I like to get very, very immersed. And then I bring in whoever is necessary, whatever skill set is required to help with that. And it's pretty remarkable how often, you know what I find? The skill set is already in the business.
Oh,
It's already there.
yeah.
What I'm looking for is, there's a number of things. I want to try to understand people. I want to be able to form my own opinion on the individuals. I'm certainly listening to whether or not I'm hearing anything that's going to be a direct connection between what's being said and to improving the business. At the most basic level of, there's something an individual is saying, or a vendor is saying, or a third party consultant is saying, that I can see connecting the dots to more revenue. Because you can go spend a ton of money on technology, processes, and systems, but if they don't help build the business, you might as well light your money on fire. I mean, ultimately, that's the goal, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I want to be able to make that connection. It doesn't have to be a fast connection. It doesn't have to happen overnight by any means. I'm patient, but I want to be able to connect the dots to revenue.
So let's say somebody right now, level Richard is saying, and I really want to consider getting into